The lights dimmed at the Mann's Chinese Theater in Hollywood on December 9th, 1996. Whitney Houston was about to face her worst nightmare in front of every major Hollywood executive, celebrity, and critic in the industry. What happened in the next 4 minutes would become the most talked about performance that almost nobody outside that theater would ever see. December 1996 was supposed to be Whitney Houston's triumphant return to acting. The Preacher's Wife wasn't just another movie, it was her first major film role since The Bodyguard's massive success 4 years earlier. The soundtrack was already climbing the charts, and I Believe in You and Me was becoming another Whitney classic. Everything was perfect. At least that's what everyone thought. 20 minutes before the premiere screening was scheduled to start, Whitney Houston sat in her dressing room at the theater, staring at her reflection in the mirror. Her makeup was flawless, expertly applied to hide the exhaustion in her eyes. Her gown was stunning, a custom Versace creation that sparkled under the dressing room lights. But her voice, the thing that mattered most, was failing her. "I can't do this," Whitney whispered to her vocal coach, Gary Katona, who had been working with her for the past hour, trying every warm-up exercise in his arsenal. "My voice is shot. I've done too many interviews, too many radio spots, too many morning show performances. I have nothing left." She'd tried steam treatments, throat coat tea, vocal rest between appearances. Nothing had been enough. The promotional schedule for The Preacher's Wife had been absolutely brutal, designed by studio executives who saw Whitney as an unstoppable machine, not a human being with limits. Whitney had done 17 interviews in 3 days, performed live on 3 different morning shows, attended 2 exhausting press junkets where she answered the same questions over and over, and done countless radio call-ins. Her voice, the instrument that had made her the most celebrated vocalist of her generation, the gift she'd been told since childhood was sacred, was completely exhausted. She could feel the strain in her throat with every word she spoke. Gary tried to reassure her. "Whitney, you can lip sync. Nobody will know. You've pre-recorded the track." Whitney's eyes flashed with something between anger and fear. "This is my movie. These are my songs. I don't lip sync. That's not who I am." There was a knock at the door. Lionel Richie walked in, already dressed in his tuxedo for the surprise duet performance they'd planned for the premiere. One look at Whitney's face told him everything he needed to know. "What's going on?" Lionel asked gently, closing the door behind him. Whitney's voice cracked as she tried to explain. "Lionel, I can't. My voice isn't there. I've pushed too hard. I can't hit the notes tonight." Lionel Richie had known Whitney for years. They'd worked together in the studio for months on the soundtrack. He'd seen her perfectionism, her fear of failure, her desperate need to always be the voice that everyone expected. "Then we cancel," Lionel said simply. "We tell them there's a technical issue. We play the recorded version. Nobody needs to know." Whitney stood up from her chair, her gown swishing around her. "No, I can't cancel. These people came to see Whitney Houston. The press is out there. If I cancel, they'll say I'm difficult. They'll say I'm a diva. They'll say I'm not professional. Whitney, I have to be perfect, Lionel. That's what they expect. That's what they've always expected." Lionel recognized that look in her eyes. He'd seen it before, in Michael Jackson, in Mariah Carey, in every artist who'd been told from childhood that their value was tied to their performance. The weight of perfection was crushing her. But there was something Whitney didn't know, something that would change everything in the next 15 minutes. The premiere coordinator knocked urgently. "5 minutes, Miss Houston. Mr. Richie, they're ready for you." Whitney's hands were shaking as she picked up her microphone. "I can't do this. I literally cannot do this." Lionel took both of her hands in his. "Then don't do it as Whitney Houston, the voice. Do it as Nippy. Do it as the girl from the church who sang because it made her feel something, not because she had to be perfect." Whitney looked at him like he was speaking a foreign language. "Lionel, I haven't been Nippy in 15 years. Maybe that's exactly the problem." The walk from the dressing room to the stage felt like a mile. Whitney could hear the murmur of the crowd. 2,000 people packed into the premiere screening. Directors, producers, actors, record executives, journalists. Every person who mattered in entertainment was in that audience. The stage was set beautifully. A simple piano, two microphones, soft lighting designed to create an intimate moment before the film screening. It was supposed to be Whitney's moment to shine. Instead, it felt like walking toward her own execution. Lionel whispered to her as they walked into the wings, "Whatever happens out there, I've got you. Trust me." The announcer's voice boomed through the theater. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the star of The Preacher's Wife, Whitney Houston, and special guest Lionel Richie, performing I Believe in You and Me." The applause was thunderous. Whitney forced a smile and walked onto the stage, her legs feeling like they might give out beneath her. Lionel was right beside her, his presence the only thing keeping her from running. The piano introduction began. Beautiful, gentle, perfect. Whitney closed her eyes and tried to find that place inside herself where the music lived. But all she could hear was the voice in her head. "Don't mess this up. Don't disappoint them. Be perfect. Be the voice." She opened her mouth to sing the first line, "I believe in you and me." The note came out clear, strong. It was working. Maybe she could pull this off. Lionel joined in for the second line, his smooth tenor blending with her soprano. The audience was completely silent, captivated. This was going exactly as planned. But then they reached the chorus. "I believe in you and me. I believe that we will be—" Whitney's voice cracked. Not subtly, not in a way that could be overlooked. It was a full, audible crack that echoed through the theater's sound system. She tried to push through to the next line, but the words wouldn't come. She'd forgotten the lyrics. In the panic of the vocal crack, in the rushing fear and exhaustion, the words that she'd sung 1,000 times simply disappeared from her mind. Whitney Houston, the voice, the woman with the most recognizable vocal instrument in the world, stood frozen on stage in front of 2,000 people with tears forming in her eyes. The piano kept playing. The audience shifted uncomfortably. Someone coughed. The seconds felt like hours. Whitney lowered her microphone, a single tear sliding down her cheek. This was it. The moment her career ended. The moment everyone would remember. Not The Bodyguard, not I Will Always Love You, but the night Whitney Houston forgot the lyrics and broke down at her own movie premiere. But Lionel Richie saw something else in that moment. He saw what Whitney couldn't see. A woman who'd been carrying the weight of perfection for so long that she'd forgotten why she started singing in the first place. He saw the little girl from the New Hope Baptist Church in Newark, who sang because it connected her to something bigger than herself. Lionel set down his own microphone and walked across the stage to Whitney. The audience watched, confused, as he took her hand. Then he did something that nobody expected. He began to sing a cappella, no microphone, no piano. Just his voice, raw and unadorned, singing the words Whitney couldn't remember. "I believe in miracles and love's a miracle." His voice wasn't as powerful as Whitney's. It wasn't as technically perfect. But it was real. It was human. It was vulnerable. Whitney looked at him, tears streaming down her face now. Lionel smiled at her and squeezed her hand. Then he leaned close and whispered, just loud enough for the front row to barely hear, "Church mode, like we're 8 years old and nobody's watching. Just feel it." Something shifted in Whitney's eyes. The fear didn't disappear, but something else rose up beneath it. Something she'd buried under years of hit records and perfect performances and critics' expectations. She squeezed Lionel's hand back and began to sing with him. A cappella, no microphone, no piano backing, just two voices in a theater. Her voice was hoarse. It cracked on some notes. She wasn't hitting the runs that had made her famous, but something else was happening, something the studio recording could never capture. She was feeling it. The words came back to her, not from memory, but from somewhere deeper, from the place where music lived before it became about charts and sales and reviews. "And baby, I'm one of those, so you can do what you believe." Lionel joined her on the harmony, his voice supporting hers, not competing with it. Two friends singing together like they were in someone's living room, not on a premiere stage in front of Hollywood's elite. Then something magical happened that nobody in that theater would ever forget. Someone in the third row, a young production assistant who'd worked on the film, began to sing along, softly at first, barely audible. Then someone else joined in. an elderly woman who'd grown up singing gospel in her own church, and another, a studio executive who hadn't sung in public since his daughter's wedding, and another, a makeup artist from the film set who'd watched Whitney transform into the preacher's wife day after day. Within 30 seconds, something impossible was happening. The entire theater, 2,000 people in formal evening wear, Hollywood's most powerful and cynical industry professionals, was singing I Believe in You and Me, a cappella with Whitney Houston and Lionel Richie. The sound was imperfect, unrehearsed, and absolutely transcendent. Denzel Washington, sitting with his wife Pauletta, was singing with tears in his eyes. Halle Berry had her hands raised like she was in Sunday service. Record executives in expensive three-piece suits were singing with their eyes closed, transported. Hard-nosed journalists who were supposed to remain objective observers had set down their notepads and were singing along. Even the theater staff, the ushers and security guards, had stopped working and joined in. The man's Chinese theater had transformed into a church. Whitney's voice grew stronger, not because it became technically perfect, but because the pressure of perfection had lifted. She wasn't performing for these people anymore. She was worshiping with them. Lionel stayed by her side the entire time, their hands still clasped, two voices leading a chorus of 2,000. When they reached the final line, I believe in you and me, the theater erupted into applause that lasted for nearly 5 full minutes. Whitney Houston, her makeup ruined by tears, her voice hoarse and imperfect, had just delivered the most powerful performance of her career. And almost nobody outside that theater would ever hear it. After the screening, as Whitney and Lionel stood in the theater lobby accepting congratulations, a well-known music critic approached them. That was extraordinary, he said. Will there be footage? Can we share this? Whitney looked at Lionel, then back at the critic. No footage. That moment was for us, for everyone in that theater. Some things are too sacred to package and sell. Later that night, in the limousine taking them to the after-party, Whitney finally spoke about what had happened. Lionel, I thought my career was over when I forgot those lyrics. Lionel shook his head. Your career as a perfect performing machine might have been over, but your career as an artist who moves people, that started tonight. I don't understand. Whitney, you've been so focused on being technically flawless that you forgot what music is actually for. It's not for showing off how many octaves you can hit. It's for connecting human beings to each other and to something bigger than themselves. Whitney was quiet for a long moment. My mother always said that the gift isn't the voice. The gift is what you do with it. Sissy is a wise woman. Tonight, when I couldn't hit those notes, when I couldn't remember the words, I thought I'd failed everyone. But you showed me that the failure would have been pretending to be perfect. Lionel smiled. You know what the most beautiful part was? When you stopped trying to be the voice and just became a voice. One voice among 2,000. That's when you were most powerful. The Preacher's Wife went on to become a box office success. The soundtrack became the best-selling gospel album of all time. I Believe in You and Me became one of Whitney's most beloved songs. But the performance at the premiere, the one where Whitney forgot the lyrics, where her voice cracked, where she cried in front of Hollywood's elite, that performance lived only in the memories of the 2,000 people who were there. Years later, when Whitney was going through her publicized struggles, Lionel Richie would sometimes receive phone calls late at night. Tell me about the premiere again, Whitney would say, and Lionel would remind her of the night she forgot the lyrics and discovered something more important than perfection. You gave 2,000 people permission to be imperfect that night, Lionel would tell her. You showed them that vulnerability is more powerful than vocal runs. That was the real Whitney. That was nippy. In 2012, just weeks before Whitney's death, Lionel received one final late-night call. I've been thinking about that night at the premiere, Whitney said, her voice sounding tired but peaceful. That was the last time I felt free on stage. Really free. You can feel that way again, Lionel told her. Maybe, Whitney said, or maybe that moment was the gift. Maybe it was supposed to show me what's possible when you stop trying to be perfect and just let yourself be real. Today, the few people who were at that premiere still talk about it. They don't talk about the movie. They don't talk about the red carpet or the celebrities in attendance. They talk about the moment when Whitney Houston's voice cracked, when she forgot the lyrics, when she cried on stage, and when her vulnerability created the most beautiful performance any of them had ever witnessed. There's no video footage, no audio recording, just 2,000 people who carry the memory of the night Whitney Houston taught them that sometimes the most powerful performances are the ones where everything goes wrong. If this story moved you, hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear that imperfection can be more beautiful than perfection. Drop a comment telling us about a time when your vulnerability became your strength. And don't forget to subscribe for more untold stories about music's greatest legends.